Welcome back to Game Theory. Today, I am Eric Garland. Exciting stuff going on. 2 grand juries have reportedly convened, one in the Southern District of Florida, the other in the District of Washington, D.C., to hear evidence about a conspiracy by the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, John Brennan, to interfere with the 2016 election using his intel agency. The smoking gun is reportedly from Brennan's testimony to Congress several years ago when he said that the CIA had nothing to do at all with the so-called Steele dossier, that fake intelligence product that was cooked up by retired MI6 officer Christopher Steele. Newly declassified documents from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence show that Brennan was almost assuredly lying about that. Brennan and the CIA did include the Steele dossier as part of an annex to support a controversial early 2017 report that stated, contrary to very recent reporting, that Putin had a specific plan to support Donald Trump through cyber attacks and other intelligence operations. That was not supported just weeks before. All of the sudden, Brennan comes in with his crew and says it is supported. And that support apparently was the Steele dossier. Brennan lied under oath about this, and so he's facing prosecution as we speak. These grand juries are probably going to get at something much larger. They seem to be targeting a grand conspiracy by numerous actors in multiple agencies to sabotage the entirety of the first Trump administration. So this is about to be one of the largest conspiracy prosecutions in history, and almost assuredly the most important. Okay, guys, it's about to get really interesting around here. This Steele dossier grand jury stuff very much interests me because it involves me, because I got involved by accident. For those of you who know about my writing on Twitter about intelligence, you probably know that some 9 years ago, I blew the lid off Trump-Russia between the time CIA Director John Brennan and Director of National Intelligence Jim Clapper tried to imply that Donald Trump was directly supported by Vladimir Putin days before their intelligence product was leaked to the press. I almost single-handedly opened and broadened the discussion about Russia's attack on the 2016 election by reaching millions of people through Twitter in my 127-tweet game theory thread, and this appears to have interfered with a larger plan by, among others, Russia, John Brennan, the head of the CIA, Representative, now Senator Adam Schiff, Hillary Clinton, and many others to delegitimize the Trump presidency before it even began. My reputation has been under assault for years over this matter, and these grand juries might help us all get to the bottom of who did what at the CIA, Office of Director of National Intelligence, and the FBI, and we could get a timeline as to who did what and when. For example, we know now that in September of 2016, up until the election, the intelligence community had concluded that Russia was probing our election infrastructure. They were doing their normal disinformation operations, but they didn't have any particular goal to put Trump in office. And in fact, we're likely expecting, like pretty much everybody else, a Hillary Clinton victory. Then Trump won, and the world panicked, which got really interesting. We now know that on December 11th, 2016, a meeting was called at the White House to create a new intelligence community assessment about Russia's role in the election. The spy agencies had just published one and given it to the president, I believe, the day before, December 8th. Its conclusion was that Putin wanted to cast doubt on our election, that it wanted political chaos, and that it probably hacked some machines, but that Russia lacked the capacity to throw the entire election to Donald Trump or any other candidate. They held a top secret meeting on December 9th, 2016. Brennan, Clapper, and others at that meeting decided that this wasn't good enough, that they wanted a report to be made public before Trump took the Oval Office, a report that said essentially that his election was Putin's fault. And then they took actions to produce a report that reached such a conclusion, even though the intelligence did not support it. But before they could do that, I got involved by accident and really without a plan. About 48 hours after they had this top secret meeting at the White House on a Sunday afternoon, December 11th, 2016, I took what I had been learning from my colleagues in intelligence all that year, and I produced a 127 tweet thread which substantially mirrored the intelligence community assessment delivered to the President of the United States days before, albeit a lot broader and a lot looser, with more context about Russian intelligence, how it works, and the years leading up to the election. I started with the idea that Russia was always messing with American elections and our democracy, and everyone's democracy. And I said that Russia had a plan to use Trump if Trump won, because Russia was always tactically flexible about these matters. And I also concluded that Russia didn't expect Trump to win. They assumed Hillary would take the White House. I also stated that it would be weird and wrong for the CIA to jump into the race for Hillary Clinton. 9 years later, there are a few takeaways. My unclassified analysis apparently mirrored the classified analysis that's now been made public of the actual intelligence community. Yay! Russia had been messing with us, they wanted chaos, and they expected Hillary to win. And they planned to use Trump, more or less, no matter what happened. And while I said the CIA should not be messing around in our elections, in our thread, that is apparently exactly what Jim Clapper and John Brennan were doing the very second I was writing it. So at this moment, there are grand juries convened for at least John Brennan, and at least about his lies around using the Steele dossier in the classified intelligence community assessment about Russian interference. Now is when we need more clarity about what happened, because this is about to become a very political issue. Many Democrats, especially the ones who are implicated in this, such as Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, they're going to frame this as a vindictive prosecution going back after a bunch of old news to punish Trump's political enemies. And, you know, there's something to that. It's going to look like that. That looks like it'll be a supportable position. After all, Trump is the guy who went around chanting "lock her up" at his opponent in 2016. Then he got impeached twice, and he got indicted after he was out of office. Then he got reelected, and now his political enemies are in the barrel. So I see where everyone's coming from. But this prosecution is necessary because this stuff should never happen again to any political party. American spies should never be involved in American elections. And the CIA apparently got involved in the 2016 United States election, trying to color, at the very least, the outcome of that election, and thus color the next election. So whereas the intelligence community and guys like me concluded that Russia attacked our election, and also that Trump had a number of Russian assets around him, especially that Paul Manafort, Russia didn't make Trump president. John Brennan and his crew worked the media to create the impression that Putin made Trump president on purpose. Thus, Trump owed Putin a favor at a minimum. And the only guys who would know that would be the CIA. They're the only ones who would be able to accurately assess what's going on in Russia. But they can never be the ones to run with the story for reasons of how the agency is set up. The CIA can never be involved in US elections because they are a clandestine service that serves directly. Unlike other agencies like the FBI, they directly serve the President of the United States at any given time. So we can't have the president using spy agencies to hurt the next president because the spies work directly for him. And that would make our country exactly like Belarus or Uzbekistan, which is ironically what the Russians have been trying to do to us for 100 years. For a century, Russia has been planting assets in the United States to commit environmental crimes, to torture our prisoners, to otherwise act like Russian officials so they can point at the United States and say, see, there's really nothing special about this country or its people. This is the most Soviet operation possible. And thus, what John Brennan and Jim Clapper did was very Russian, whether or not that was their intention. Because publishing the false conclusion that Putin preferred Trump and that Trump owed him a favor, and by giving those false conclusions to the public, both through these classified documents that made it to other politicians or information that was apparently leaked directly to the media, those men jammed the CIA into the fabric of America's elections, which is what the Soviets always dreamed of. And that issue needs unpacking no matter what political party you happen to like this week. I've done a lot of videos on this topic already. There's a video on how the Steele dossier is a complete fraud from top to bottom that doesn't look like any serious intelligence product. So for everybody out there this week saying, oh, the Steele dossier was fine, nobody ever disproved it. No. Everybody serious knows that this was crap, so let's move on. And I've done a whole hour-long video that'll analyze that top to bottom, from the fonts to how it's written. Everything's in there. It's crap. I also analyzed the John Durham report, which concludes that not only that the Steele dossier was a hoax, but that implies that it was likely produced by agents of the Russian regime. Its main sources were Igor Danchenko and Chuck Dolan, the former head of the Massachusetts Democratic Party, who was working, provably on paper, for the Kremlin itself. So I've already looked at a bunch of this, but there's a bunch more that we still need to get to. With super intel dorky, which actually makes me happy, ironically. The CIA under John Ratcliffe has published a full tradecraft review which analyzes how the December 30th to Jan 6th, 2017 ODNI analysis of Russian interference was produced, and specifically how it failed to adhere to established intelligence reporting standards, and critically how they snuck the turd of the Steele dossier into the classified annex and then pretended that they didn't use it. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has declassified whistleblower reports as well as emails from Admiral Mike Rogers, the former director of the National Security Agency, about concerns from multiple professionals that the conclusions pushed by Clapper and Brennan were not supported by intelligence reporting from all the various agencies. Senator Chuck Grassley has declassified the classified annex of the John Durham final report about the production of the Steele dossier, which included intelligence possessed by the Obama administration during the 2016 campaign that indicated that Hillary Clinton's campaign was most likely cooking up a story to frame Trump with the help of the FBI and CIA. And we now know part of that effort to be called the Steele dossier. So we're going to be doing this in chapters. First, though, I want to start with some material that is decidedly not classified, has never been classified, and which is possibly why you're watching this video to begin with. That material will be a review of my December 11th, 2016 viral Twitter thread, which covered what I believed at that time, what honest intelligence professionals believed about the Russian attacks on our election, how it implicated the then incoming Trump administration, and how it meant America was in deep trouble. I think it's going to help the average viewer, the average citizen, see what I wrote back then, and maybe to understand why it upset the apple cart so much. Not just for the Russian intelligence services, who were understandably upset that I was bringing millions of people, regular Americans, just how their scams worked, but also for the Israelis, the Chinese, and sadly, for corrupt elements within the United States government, apparently at its highest levels. As a lifetime career intelligence analyst, I regularly revisit what I wrote on that Sunday back in 2016 on a somewhat regular basis. I've learned a ton since that day. The whole world has. Sorry about that. We're basically at war with Russia now. So I go back regularly to check up on what I was thinking on that fateful day and how it compares with what we're looking at today. Now this matters because the game theory thread kicked off an enormous firestorm, but it wasn't exactly clear just who was pissed off with me. Hundreds of articles in major media came out of nowhere to write about a spontaneously written tweet thread by a largely unknown intelligence professional. And huge botnets came out swarming on Twitter and on other social media platforms to defame its author, yours truly, and to discredit the idea that Russia had any impact on the election whatsoever. Now back then, I would have said it looked like Russia and Israel were particularly upset with my thread, but today we know that John Brennan, Jim Clapper, Hillary Clinton, and their Confederates had their own motivations to attack my writing and my voice because they were already executing a plan to characterize Trump and Russia before he took office. So to fully understand the Steele dossier in context, I think we need to go back to my 2016 thread, look at just what pissed these guys off so much, and then we can look at behind the scenes at the CIA and the FBI, and then to the prosecutions that we're about to see, because I think it all makes sense when you put it all together. To understand the context of John Brennan's actions for which he might be prosecuted, I think we have to review the timeline of the election in terms of Trump and Russia. June 16th, 2015, Trump takes his famous escalator ride and announces his candidacy as a Republican candidate for president. October 2015, the private intelligence firm Fusion GPS, originally financed by so-called right-wing billionaire Paul Singer and ultimately by the Hillary Clinton campaign, starts to research Trump, Paul Manafort, and others with regards to Russia. They're the guys who end up employing Christopher Steele to compile a dossier. In December 2015, Trump characterizes Vladimir Putin killing journalists and dissidents in Russia as Putin being a strong leader of his country. In March 2016, Trump names Paul Manafort as his campaign manager, even after Manafort has done work directly for the pro-Putin Party of Regions in Ukraine. April 2016, the Clinton campaign, through Perkins Coie law firm attorney Mark Elias, takes over the Steele dossier project from Paul Singer. In July of 2016, man, all hell breaks loose. Trump talks about potentially lifting Obama's sanctions on Russia for invading Crimea. Trump also said that he thought Russia would be rewarded by America's press corps if they had a copy of Hillary Clinton's emails. By the way, I had to go back. My own memory, I had some memory bias. I thought that he was talking about that Russia would be rewarded for finding Hillary's emails in general, which kind of made it sound like Trump was inviting the Russians to hack our election. In fact, what he'd said was the press corps would love that illegally obtained material, which is a pretty different statement when you think about it. One is inviting the Russians to attack us. The other is accusing the press corps of working with the Russians. This Trump guy, his statements in retrospect are very interesting, and you need to go back to see them in their totality. I find them to be more interesting now than they were back then. And they were pretty interesting back then. Other stuff that went down in July 2016. Trump told George Stephanopoulos of ABC News that Putin won't be invading Ukraine. Write it down. And he was asked directly by ABC News, hey, have you ever done business with Russians? He's like, yeah, sometimes. He admitted to making over $50 million on a deal selling a Florida home to Dmitry Rubovlev, who was a Russian oligarch. He also said, yeah, I probably sell condos to Russians in Florida or wherever else. Whatever, I'm in the real estate business. Sure, I do it, but I don't owe them any money. The Clinton campaign began opining both publicly and privately that Putin was supporting Trump. Campaign managers like Robbie Mook were making these implications in public, and we now have emails among some of the executives who worked for the Clinton campaign that they were talking about not just Putin supporting Trump, but that they thought that they should publicize the allegations that Putin was supporting Trump. Privately, the press corps was beginning to discuss the existence of what we now know as the Steele dossier. And around this time, the FBI opened up an investigation called Crossfire Hurricane and began to investigate Carter Page, who had volunteered to work for the Trump campaign through a FISA warrant, even though Carter Page was a CIA asset spying on the Russians for our government, not an asset of the Russian government. We have text messages from that time showing prosecuting attorney Lisa Page writing to her then paramour/boyfriend, Special Agent Peter Strzok, who did counterintelligence for the FBI, stating that it was her goal to keep Trump from being president. October 2016, the Russian stuff keeps going. Russian front WikiLeaks dumps propaganda all over election for the second time that year. Trump declared that he loves WikiLeaks. At the debate, Clinton calls Trump a puppet of Putin directly, and he says, no, I'm no puppet, you're the puppet. Puppet, 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 puppet. Slate published a fraudulent story about Alpha Bank doing business with the Trump organization that was cooked up entirely by the Clinton campaign with some other bad actors. The New York Times said the FBI was investigating Trump, but found no links to Russia. Then we skip ahead to November 2016. Trump wins. The following week, Putin awarded Trump the Cossack of Russia Award, their highest civilian award for non-Russians. Nobody stepped up to work for the Trump White House at first. Everybody looked off in the middle distance and finished all the alcohol and Robitussin in the House. Lindsey Graham and John McCain got together to yell about Vladimir Putin, and everybody was in a fugue state. December 7th, 2016, the intelligence community was working on a new President's Daily Brief examining the potential impact of cyber hacks on the election results. DNI Clapper's office developed talking points based on the PDB's findings. Foreign adversaries did not use cyber attacks on election infrastructure to alter the US presidential election outcome, and that we have no evidence of cyber manipulation of election infrastructure intended to alter results. Very specific statements. This is the state of play, December 7th, 2016. December 8th, 2016, IC officials discussed the draft President's Daily Brief, which found that Russian and criminal actors did not impact recent US election results by conducting malicious cyber activities against election infrastructure. And the group also decided that the PDB would be published the following day due to high administration interest. So they have a big meeting about this, December 9th, 2016. The Obama White House gathered top cabinet officials for a National Security Council Principals Committee meeting. So you had Jim Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, John Brennan, Susan Rice, John Kerry, Brian McKeon, Attorney General Loretta Lynch, Andy McCabe from the FBI, not Jim Comey, Andy McCabe, very interesting, and Avril Haines, who was, I believe, Deputy Director of National Intelligence. The assessment will address the following questions. This is the order of business, December 9th, 2016. How did Moscow seek to influence the US presidential election in 2016? What tools did they use? 1, hacking. 2, leaks. 3, cyber activity against voting systems. 4, media spin, trolls, fake news. 5, domestic Russian intelligence efforts. And why did Moscow direct these activities? What have the Russians hoped to accomplish? So that's the 9th. They've got answers already. They already have an assessment of what Russia's been up to. The presumption here on the 9th is that's not good enough, and it's not clear what else they're going to get. These things take a few minutes, people, and this is in the Tradecraft review by John Ratcliffe's office at the CIA right now, that these guys tried to rush a multi-month process through to before Trump took office. It's nerdy. It involves standards of time frame and pressure and stuff that really only top-level intel nerds really care about. But it matters because these guys, they speak with a very powerful voice, and they conspired to take that voice and move it into public and give it to the American people without any context as to what they'd be looking at. This is why we don't have our spy agencies report to the American people about the outcome of our elections. Not only is it kind of on its face inappropriate, it's not clear that the American people would know what they're being told, because this is stuff that vanishingly few nerds care about. That's why we don't do it, among many other reasons. So that's December 9th, 2016. They're like, all right, guys, we're going to do a new, different intelligence community assessment, even though we have one that doesn't say that Russia changed the outcome of the election, that doesn't say that Trump was elected because of Vladimir Putin, but they've kind of decided that they're gonna reach a different conclusion, that Trump has really been working with the Russians and colluding with their government the whole time, and that the Russians played a major impact. They played a major role impacting the election. That's the 9th. December 11th, 2016. I dropped my kids off with their mom. I got a few hours, and I just start writing on Twitter. Because everybody's panicking and they're like, Garland, what are we going to do? What's the world going to do? What are the spies going to do? I'm like, what do you want spies to do about it? That's not what they do. You don't like this Trump guy? Like, you should have argued with your uncle harder at Christmas and Thanksgiving. Well, I don't know. So I had my ear to the ground on what was happening with the whole Trump thing, who was working with his administration, which was bizarre for weeks. Like, nobody wanted to work with this guy. And I was slowly, I was collecting up all this information about kind of what the Russians had done, what they hadn't, and where we were left with all this. And it was very alarming because we had like foreign agents all over the place. And they'd clearly had some impact on the election. And this guy was about to take office, and it kind of looked like they had a lever over him. So I went public, 127 tweet thread. We're going to go through that thread on this video. And I went from having 5,000 followers that afternoon to 33,000 the next morning. And now I have 250,000. That thread got 5,000 retweets. My Twitter exploded. Now this part's important. I've never revealed this before. December 13th, 2016, one of Jim Clapper's colleagues called me personally and asked me if I'd be willing to stop making public statements. I declined. The comment from that intelligence executive was negative when I declined. More soon. December 14th, 2016, intelligence community officials again leaked to the media, this time claiming that IC officials believe, with a high level of confidence, that Russian President Vladimir Putin was personally involved in the US election hack. Rewind to the 9th. Nobody had that conclusion. There was no support for it. Nobody had said high confidence, which is a very important statement. Somebody in the intelligence community goes to the media and says, no, it's in the bag. We have it already. January 6, 2017, the intelligence community published Assessing Russian Activities and Intentions in Recent U.S. Elections, the Analytic Process and Cyber Incident Attribution. This was based in part on the Steele dossier, now confirmed by declassified documents from the ODNI from this year. In this document, the Director of National Intelligence pushes a conclusion, partially based on the Steele dossier, that Russia wanted to elect Trump without substantial new information that would justify it. Very, very naughty. January 10th, 2017, the digital news outlet, which doesn't exist anymore, BuzzFeed, publishes the Steele dossier just as the intelligence community assessment is discussed under oath in front of Congress by Brennan and Clapper. So the media and Congress then engaged in an unusual two-front war with this Steele dossier stuff. On one front, Democrats, led by Adam Schiff, investigated Trump, accusing him of collusion with the Russian Federation. This led to the Mueller investigation, which resulted in the prosecution of a number of individuals, but not President Trump. And on another front, the same media outlets published a series of defamatory articles about me, accusing me of trafficking in conspiracy theories, only then to turn around and repeat stories written by other authors in the same vein about the Steele dossier and its conclusions. So, okay, why did these guys try and destroy my reputation? I think we need to go back to my 2016 thread and see how it holds up in general, but see how it differs substantially from what Clapper and Brennan were pushing. Because I think that was the problem that I posed for the Russians, for their friends, and for these intelligence officials who had made the very distasteful decision to involve themselves in the 2016 election and beyond to the 2020 election. What I said represented the intelligence community, and what they said defrauded the intelligence community. Happy stuff. I'm sure I won't get in trouble for this. Let's go. Okay, we're going to have fun looking at the thread from 2016. I do, because it's written in kind of a fun style. I don't normally drop F-bombs and other profanity in my intelligence writing. It was a first for me, and it was incredibly successful. Apparently, people want potty language with their national security analysis. Who knew? It was a brand new niche. I didn't know it existed. It was kind of fun to dig it out myself. Looking back at my game theory thread and now looking at the declassified documents from the ODNI about Clapper and Brennan, I think I see why they attacked me. The Steele dossier was a story that didn't just implicate Russia, which always attacks our elections. It made Trump out to be in Putin's pocket, which was not supported by the evidence. The game theory thread talked about domestic and foreign actors betraying America. It said that Russia would use a Trump victory, and it talked about Russian cyber activities, but it did not say, I did not say Russia made Trump president, or even that they expected his victory. In fact, I said they didn't expect it. In other words, my game theory thread represented the same basic assumptions and conclusions as the classified assessments of the intelligence analysts throughout the community throughout 2016 until that fateful December 9th, 2016 meeting where they decided to reach totally different conclusions. Then, when my thread got famous, I apparently represented a competitive voice, one that would potentially cast doubt on what Brennan and Clapper were trying to push out to the media. Evidently, I was not just a threat to Russia and its intelligence services, but to dirty spies within the US government. And that was not clear to me until Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe top-sided these documents about whistleblowing and intelligence nerd tradecraft review. Brennan and Clapper took actions that were against the ethos of real intelligence professionals, and that is what I represent. Thank you very much. So we're going to look at my 2016 game theory thread from Twitter to highlight exactly why Brennan and Clapper were working so hard to give the media another impression about what happened with Trump and Russia. Because I think, even using unclassified sources, the information was out there more or less about what was going on with Donald Trump and Russia. That he had Russian assets all over him, as a whole lot of people at certain levels in New York and California and Washington, D.C. did and kind of always do. But he wasn't working for them directly. However, he had a bunch of creepy guys working for him that, wouldn't normally be included in the presidential campaign. Hey, that's very interesting, but it doesn't mean he was in their pocket. And if, as Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has said, maybe he wasn't allowed to say it or authorized or whatever, if Trump was a high-level FBI informant the whole time, if he was like doing a special deal with Jim Comey the whole time, not to try and mess up Hillary Clinton, but to catch a bunch of dirty Russians at the highest level, that would be deeply interesting, and that would color a lot of the decisions he made. It doesn't get his Russian asset friends off the hook at all, and didn't. A lot of them got prosecuted by our friend Robert S. Mueller III, but it might get Trump out of trouble, and he's the one everybody voted for. So that's why this all kind of matters. So there was the information on the ground that people like me with an intelligence background, without being read into a classified file, so I'm not breaking the law, you could, if you had a certain sensibility, look at what's happening going, I think I see what's happening here, as I did, and then come out publicly and go, hey everybody, since the news is not doing a good job and our politicians are freaking out, I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm going to come out of the shadows, since I'd never really talked about my national security analysis. It was kind of it was on the secret menu at Starbucks, if you will. I never really talked about it. So I came out and I started talking about it, and it sold like free chicken and Coke, Anyhow, we're going to go back over this thread and see what it is that these guys didn't like, that they had to knock down so hard, because it's not that far off from what they were concluding on how gross some of this stuff was, how Russian and borschte this stuff around Trump was. It just failed to make the conclusion that Trump was working for them. And doing that before the man even takes the Oval Office, after he's been elected by the American people, well, there's a lot of heavy implications there, especially since it's coming from the CIA, who we do not want making comments on our elections. So let's go. The famous first tweet, thread. I'm now hearing this meme that says Obama, Clinton, et al. Are doing nothing, just gave up. Guys, it's time for some game theory. Now, game theory does not refer to Nash equilibrium and the prisoner's dilemma. It was a misnomer. I was just going off the top of my head, and I was thinking of strategic simulation or tabletop gaming at the Pentagon. That's where, okay, we're gonna play this scenario out. Imagine like a game of Risk or Civilization. You're gonna play the Mongols. You are gonna play the French. You're gonna play the Romans. And you go around the table and you go, oh, okay, they do this with real countries. They're gonna do this North Korea, Japan, China. Okay, a nuclear sub goes down in the sea of whatever. You play the North Koreans, you play the Japanese, you play the Chinese, I'm gonna play NATO. You go around the table and go, I'm gonna do this. And you go, no, I'm gonna do this. Well, I'm gonna do this. And you have your classified briefing books in front of you that a bunch of intel nerds put together that tell us the latest classified intelligence about what these actors want in the world. And then we go around the table and you play for a few hours and they take down everything that happened, like, oh, we nuked Tokyo. Okay, so we nuked Beijing or whatnot. And we test our assumptions by playing against other strategists who are going to work as hard as they can to try and get the Chinese what they want out of this situation, what the North Koreans want out of this situation. We play as hard as we can. We see who got what in our simulation, and we write it all down. And that very nerdy, almost Dungeons and Dragons approach to the Pentagon informs policymakers about what operational plans they should be making in the advance for potential futures. This is my specialty, future scenario production. So I was thinking about the theory of strategic tabletop gaming. I just said, it's time for some game theory. And like a lot of things that go viral or otherwise become famous, it was not intended to do so. And the economics community freaked out and said, that's not Nash equilibrium. Yeah, you're right, fellas. Go back to your nerd cave. It was not economics. I was talking about Pentagon tabletop gaming. You caught me. Moving on. Actor analysis, because I'm thinking about a strategic tabletop game here. The Russians enter the game with a broad objective, flexible tactics, and several acceptable outcomes. Note the timestamp on this, 3:30 p.m., December 11th, 2016. All of this gets written down in about an hour and a half, and as I start writing on Twitter, increasingly my notifications start exploding to the point I have to turn them off permanently. Thousands upon thousands of, I forget what they were called at that time, likes, retweets, comments, they're all flooding in as I'm writing it. I realize I've hit the nerve. I realize people need to know about this stuff. So I just keep writing, and my tone gets a little more serious as time goes on. I had no idea what the response would be, and I certainly had no idea what the impact would be on my life, or I wouldn't have done it, let me tell you. But here we are. This subversion can take many forms, driving wedges between US Commonwealth, Euro intel collection, that's the US, the UK, and the Europeans, intelligence collection, break up NATO, and create chaos. So in general, what is it the Russians want on any given year? What do they use the KGB and its successor agencies for? They want to mess up Western countries sharing intelligence with each other. They want to keep us from trusting each other. They want generalized chaos, and however they do it, they don't care. The game has been developing for many years, is asymmetrical, and much cheaper than building a decent aircraft carrier. Fun fact, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia later on answered some question at a press gaggle saying, well, they do this because it's cheaper than building a decent aircraft carrier. I was like, not even gonna sue you over royalties. Thank you for using that. I think it's an efficient way of talking about how these pipsqueak shitty countries end up smacking us even though we have all the nukes and aircraft carriers. Is they do this other stuff that's really tricky because it's cheaper and easier than building an aircraft carrier, and they're better at it than us. So in terms of asymmetrical warfare, it's a brilliant strategy, and we have been slow to catch up because there's way more money in building aircraft carrier systems than there are in making sure that your intelligence is really good. That's why the Russians have beat us, even though their country sucks and their economic system sucks and everything about them sucks to this day. Plus, the Russians fucking rule at covert shit. Always have. Ask a Cold Warrior. Mucho respect for our adversaries. They do clever work. Thought it then, thought it all throughout my career, think it today. They're better at us. They're better at this stuff than us. Respect the Russians, or they will make you humble. And they have, even since I've written this. So, still respect. Also, they can fuck off. Post-communism, they, the Russians, are reduced to drunk uncle status in the global balance of power. Mouthy, smart, degraded, much reduced in stature. It's the 90s. Russians as people are civilized, artistic, enamored of brilliance and tragedy, and generally proud. And should be. They do not like this. From this position launches an initiative from an old hand at the KGB, now solidified in influence. Subvert for the throat. Go big, go hard. Man, that is the Russian ethos in this stuff, and pretty much in everything, to a T. Go big, go hard, go aggressive even when you have nothing behind you. You will probably get rewarded for it strategically. And the guy behind that, Vladimir Putin, was a trained KGB officer. He specialized in East Germany and the Stasi. He is an aggressive old hand. Respect him or he will humble you. While the West is frivolous and lazy and post-history, that's a crack at Francis Fukuyama, the end of history. While the West is frivolous and lazy and post-history, the clever take advantage. And here begins our present story. Let's skip ahead to WikiLeaks. Brilliant! Ingratiate the left into this anti-establishment distrust of Western intel. George W. Bush and Dick Cheney being slovenly, reckless idiots, the moral authority of Iraq and U.S. intel is nil. In step journalists. Now, I admit this is not super coherent because I skip from the 2010 to 2013 era of WikiLeaks and its operation to get the left to distrust intelligence to back to 2001, 2, and 3 about George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. And remember, I did not have a plan. I'm writing this basically stream of consciousness. So I did not have this in categories or brackets. I had no plan. So I'm just setting up the context of how WikiLeaks kind of became part of our consciousness. This supposed international journalism group that comes in and just happens to specialize in hard drives from the Pentagon, which we would just call, and have in grand juries, espionage, right? So in step, quote, journalists, or spies, obviously. So obvious to me. America had been so propagandized for 3, 4, 5, 6 years about WikiLeaks that, oh, they're journalists, when they're, by the legal definition, they're not journalists. They are not journalists. They do not have a country that they adhere to. They do not have a printing press that they adhere to. They are just there to run computers to operate espionage against mainly the United States. Not really despots. They really didn't do a lot of journalism against North Korea, now did they? Nor against China. No, they specialized in Western democracies. How Russian is that? Pretty easy to guess, even if you're not an intelligence professional. But here we are, several years the US media is saying WikiLeaks is journalists. They're clearly not journalists. Stealing hard drives from US intel and dumping them to foreign agents, that's snicker journalism. Free speech. Rofel Mao. Oh, and such grand characters, so well run. Manning, Glenn Greenwald. So righteous, yet fragile, and feisty. Try a Twitter war with Glenn. Now, fun fact, I had been beefing online, not his main antagonist, but I had been taking on Glenn Greenwald since this WikiLeaks stuff had been going on, but especially once Edward Snowden departed from Moscow with a bunch of stuff from the NSA. And Glenn is a real nasty character. In fact, he woke up the next morning after this thread and called me mentally ill and started defaming me and, retreated to his hidey hole down in Brazil. Oh, you Philistine, you just hate journalism. Sigh, swig something strong. And Moscow must have been doubling over. Then, OMG, that worked so well that the pièce de résistance was next. Snowden, booyah, the big game, NSA, Prism, Spasm. Glenn Greenwald supported Snowden walking out from the NSA and saying the NSA has this program called Prism where they get all our stuff. So that I'm basically drawing a trend line, not very well, but between Bradley, then Chelsea Manning, absconding with hard drives from the Pentagon, to Snowden walking out the door talking about the NSA. That this operation from WikiLeaks to appear like journalists had been intensifying over the years here, and now was kind of at a critical point. Incidentally, the NSA was about the only agency that the Russians took seriously. But then, this earnest young man, he tells the truth. Did you know your toaster is spying on you? The government, it is anywhere. It's everywhere. They spy on allies, all bad. Snowden had said that we were spying on the Germans and that allies shouldn't spy on each other, which if you know anything about the spy game, you know that's ridiculous. We all spy on each other and we warn each other if something bad's going on in the other person's country. It especially helps if you've got a problem with like a political candidate that's really working for this other country, which is the exact system that Christopher Steele was trying to take advantage of. That thing that Christopher Steele did is actually pretty typical, but it's not used in public and it's not made so partisan as it was. That was the problem. Not just that we had one of our friendly allies, spy agencies, watching our back, like, hey man, that guy hangs out with this guy. We got pictures from over here. That's actually really orthodox, and it's something you want. And it's something that Ed Snowden and the WikiLeaks people were crapping all over. They're like, yes, don't warn each other about who in your midst are traitors, because spying on allies is bad, guys. I mean, if you're a spook, this is a joke. But I put it in the context of what had just transpired with intelligence and the Iraq War. Interesting, because John Brennan and Jim Clapper were involved in the production of fake Iraq War intelligence as well. So it wasn't their first rodeo with this stuff. Still hungover from the rotten venality of the Iraq War and Bush's perversion of the intelligence community is reliable WikiLeaks journalism's the NSA. Don't you call it something else. Hard drives from the NSA is journalism, even when you take the files to Brazil. Honest, ask Glenn. And then, auto-magically, our man Ed ends up, what's this now? In Russia? Well, they are such welcoming folks. How nice. Langley and Fort Meade run out of bourbon in about 3 hours, and every intel guy in Russia is drunk, dancing on the desks, and laughing. And the left, holy fucking adorable Batman, Honi soit qui mal y pense. How dare you suggest untoward Russian involvement? Journalisms! Now, Honi soit qui mal y pense is the motto of the Order of the Garter in Britain. It's Old French for be ashamed he who thinks ill of it. Has to do with a garter falling off a woman's leg and the king stepping down to put the garter back on her leg just to help her out from an embarrassing wardrobe malfunction. And when the court snickers at the king, he turns around and says, basically, how dare you look ill at this? I'm just trying to do the right thing. So that was an overly sophisticated comment here, but it's Twitter. It's the middle of the afternoon, and now I'm rolling. The notifications are pinging in. I realize I've got some form of an audience, so I'm just letting out the fishing line, just having some fun here. Journalisms. U.S. intel snorts all of the Robitussin in the DC MDVA area. Putin calls Snowden a weird guy. Moving on to the current chapter. I'm assuming that most of the intelligence community did not think much of Snowden turning up in Moscow. And Putin says, yeah, he's a weird guy. I mean, it is what it is. I'm making a joke about the Robitussin, but I don't think American spies were too happy about the whole situation. Back over to the right now. Meanwhile, at the Fox Nation forums, the other part of this impressive op is percolating, the buttress of the alt-right. Once upon a time, Dan Rather chased Nixon around a room, asking him questions very harshly, and the notion of the evil media elite was born. That really is, I think, the exodus and genesis of people saying it's the liberal media, because Dan Rather went after Nixon, and they're like, this whole thing against Nixon involves the Washington Post, it involves CBS News. They're against the Republicans, instead of maybe they're just bad at their jobs for other reasons, they're corrupt for other reasons. No, they're specifically, it's the Democrats who run the media versus the Republicans. This is where I think the image got started. See, because Nixon got impeached, that meant the media was in on it. WAPO, New York Times, traitors, we look bad. And the media hate begins. Never mind that to know something in Topeka, somebody's got to send you a newspaper or a radio signal or whatevs. The media is lying. Now it's true. High-level journalists and editors don't always see the world like Johnny Lunchpail in Missouri. True facts, but trouble. Republicans decide to create a whole new layer of think tanks and media outlets in the 1980s dedicated to the other side. The think tanks have a point of view, but some are quite good, Cato in particular. Heritage came up with what is now Obamacare. American Enterprise Institute, 2 out of 3. I used to live next to AEI, the American Enterprise Institute. I was roommates with one of the guys who worked for Bill Kristol during the run-up to the Iraq War, and I heard firsthand that they were lying about all the Iraq War intelligence. So 2 out of 3. I do not like Cato or Heritage too much at all, but AEI isn't even in the running. But then the media play comes in. The cranky, insane tent pastors on AM radio get a makeover. They become legitimate, embraced. Magnates, Rupert Murdoch, start investing in outlets. Brand new pundits get huge audiences yelling about the way things ought to be, parentheses for white people, a reference to Missouri's Rush Limbaugh. And it's more successful than free chicken and beer. The money flows, the ratings swell. An Australian stats a TV network in the US. What develops is an attractive, well-produced, alternate universe. You no longer need an alternate take. You have alternate facts. Yes, Kellyanne Conway stole alternative facts from me. I don't know that specifically, but when she was talking about how many people actually showed up for Trump's inauguration, she talked about, we have alternative facts. I'm like, ah. Now, I wasn't going to sue Mark Warner for using cheaper than a decent aircraft carrier, but I had serious threats about suing Kellyanne Conway for 4 seconds. Then Randy Rainbow did a super funny video about alternative facts, and I decided to let everything transpire and let the universe unfold as it should. Al Gore mutters and bores his way out of a presidency in a race against a guy who spoke English like he learned it from Rosetta Stone. And now the stage is set for a metastasis of batshit nuttery, jingoism, and irrational autocratic fervor. A party becomes a cult. That'd be the GOP. September 11th, 2001 occurs. A bunch of guys are in DC who couldn't wait to go to Iraq. And the right-wing media is shiny and tuned up. We go kick a bunch of barbarian ass in Afghanistan, as well we should have. They were beating women and destroying Buddhas. Fuck them. But then, the axis of evil speech. And all the analysts in DC I know collectively go, oh, they're not serious, are they? Bill Clinton spent most of his years pounding the living snot out of Hussein. Dude built anything funny looking? In came the rockets. There was this one concerning nation state for most, and hint, it's in Asia. The other threat was non-state actors, which played out. Now, what I meant is, at a high level, the strategic intelligence analysts were saying we've got two main threats against the United States. A near-peer strategic competitor in Asia, which means China, and non-state actor networks, which means Al-Qaeda. In fact, I knew a guy who had a meeting on September 12th, 2001, to try and reorient the Pentagon away from China and a little more onto these shadowy nation-state actors. Based on what happened the day before that meeting, the meeting never took place. But those are the kinds of people I knew in Washington, D.C. at that time, and one thing was for certain. People were interested in the near-peer Asian competitor. They were interested in the shadowy networks. Ain't nobody was interested in Saddam Hussein. And now, head desk, they're going to Iraq with bullshit intel. God damn it. God damn it. This is going to suck, said smart people. And there's the entire right-wing think tank and media machine, blaring, careening, gloating, from the government itself and from every outlet. How dare you be skeptical? We have agencies, intel, it's secret. Do you want more planes in your nostrils up your butts? Be patriotic. And goddamn, do those media outlets sell a lot of ads for trucks, painkillers, pharmaceuticals, and financial services. Many earnest patriots also pointed out how there are apparently no weapons that could have blown up Cleveland in Iraq, but now this whole thing has morphed into tribalism. Yes, they did too find weapons of mass depression. You suck, push rocks, pussy. What I mean to say is it got very, very heated. We went to Iraq. Some of us said, I don't think that they're a threat, and we were told to shut up. And then we went in, and turned out there really wasn't weapons the way we were told by Jim Clapper at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and Don Rumsfeld and others. And then we were told we weren't patriotic enough because we weren't supporting the administration in their bullshit war that they cooked up. And there's a lot of propaganda going on. And Coulter comes on TV to talk over B-roll of rusty munitions that we sold Hussein ourselves and said, well, look, there they are. Total propaganda. America looks like shit. Our intel services take a hell of a beating, and Iraq's invasion, which was basically unplanned, results in chaos. I skip right ahead to 2005. Katrina, Bush, looking out the window, confused. But hey, in intel news, the NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, helps critically. 2008. The housing Ponzi we used to get out of the dot-com bust 9/11 era recession has now gone pear-shaped, utterly nuclear. America's banks The only other thing other than movies and video games we do reliably all shit the bed simultaneously. That's a reference to Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash for you ultra nerds. If you're both a sci-fi nerd and an Intel nerd, maybe you get what I'm saying there. We then elect a cappuccino-colored president whose middle name is Hussein. The right goes completely over the cliff into insane. They start the Tea Party. Remember Boston, Patriots, something, something, Tea Party, nothing matters, take it all back, yeah! I was in Washington, D.C., and they would have their events on the mall, and we called it the Spell Check Festival. My favorite being, get your government hands off my Medicare. I just didn't even know where to start with that stuff. But it was very excited. You had a lot of poofy-haired women from Texas coming up with their badly spelled signs, the Tea Party! You know, it was good all-American fun, right? This political movement, meaning the Tea Party, happens when the only thing Obama has really said with conviction is fired up, ready to go, in late November 2008. But on George Washington's grave, this has gone too far, and the entire right-wing media gets its next several years of revenue locked. Now we've got a really, really fertile field in which former KGB agents can make a long play, and Moscow gets to work. So I've set this whole field up that you had, I'm not saying Russia's behind it, but you have all this political chaos, and Russia loves that stuff. We're divided, Russia loves that stuff. And after the blow-up of 2008, after the economy was on its knees, now Moscow has got stuff to work with. They've also collected up all these assets from their Russian mafia, from the oligarchs and despots in the former Soviet countries. They have created a global network with billions upon billions of dollars, and they can fund their spies to do all kinds of things. And I say, that's when they get to real work, man. Now, going back to 2009, America is at this weird nihilist place, which is one thing for France and Russia, but not for earnest Midwesterners who are agape. Now the American left has got some juice back, but the right is just apoplectic from pure suffering. Both are ripe for subversion. The left is out of love with American business and military-industrial complex. The right foams at the mouth against legitimate government. And the guys who've been twisting minds from Vladivostok to Havana get back to work building an alt-media structure. We've already covered the genius of that whole WikiLeaks op on the left. Score! Now for the perversion of the formerly nationalist right. Note that I'm implying that both left and right have been attacked by Russian intelligence, because the Russians, they do the whole spectrum. They don't leave anything on the table. It's no fun if you don't control both sides of the conversation. And whereas some people in the intelligence community might be implying that the Republicans have the Russia problem, I'm saying, no. Everyone probably has the same version of problem here. Jesus tap dancing Christ. There's a black dude in the White House living there. It is not hard to convince Southerners that this is insane. But put in a little elbow grease on the internet forums, and soon you can have the Northern John Adams type conservatives as well. A whole generation of disaffected Rush Limbaugh fans, we listened and dittoed so hard, why is there a black dude there, is ripe for picking. In addition to alt finance sites, that'd be Zero Hedge, and Russia Today, a new TV network, they start infiltrating social media. Disclosure, because I'm mouthy all the time like this, Russia Today has had me on as a guest. They prop up US subversives and they don't edit you. Yeah, I've done a few rounds on Russia Today and Al Jazeera and reported back what I saw. Fun fact. Al Jazeera and RT just let me talk. US media almost always wants some hand in the final product before booking you. Ironic, no. But from 2009 until the 2016 election, a madness is being brewed and poured down the throats of increasingly hysterical Americans. When you imbibe from this potion, everything is awful and everyone official is lying to you. Only other members of the cult are with you. US media, which is complicit in many of our problems, is portrayed for the extremists as conspiratorial liars all the time. Formerly sane members of US society, sounding like my schizophrenic grandfather, who said government was keeping him from his mission. Only the government knew that the Archangel Gabriel was sending him to find the next Jesus. So cut it out. CIA, stop it, giant conspiracy. All of that was a personal disclosure I've never discussed in public. My grandfather passed on in 2008. He was nuttier than Chinese chicken salad. He officially had a paranoid schizophrenia diagnosis, and he did believe that the Archangel Gabriel had dispatched him to find the next Jesus, and he told people that he thought the government was trying to stop him. So I've heard crazy in my life. I really have. But very much literally, when you start hearing people that you know not to be mentally ill to start sounding like this, it's like, okay. In other words, it's highly ironic that I got accused of conspiracy theory when I literally have a lifetime experience sorting out the difference between literal paranoid conspiracies and actual analysis of grand conspiracies, the kind that go before grand juries. So we're all about to learn something here. And then people you knew from functional daily life started talking that way. People with car dealerships, dentists, regular folk. They started with conspiracy, especially after 2012, because damn it, there shouldn't be a black dude. Two terms, no! Remember all your conservative friends and family. Remember them at Thanksgiving, especially like after Barack Obama won again in 2012. Like, remember Thanksgiving that year? Do you remember everything that happened in 2013, 14 during Ferguson and all this? That there was 2 terms of a black president and his middle name was Hussein. Just the world was awful and everything was the rush to cockpit election. Everything was hysterical. That was their tone, which is part of why I'm using all these all caps. I wasn't excited. I wasn't hysterical while I was writing this. I was trying to model some of what I think other people sounded like. They were not very rational as they discussed American politics. They're all in on it. The corporations, the media whores, the government, except for my Medicare. Don't touch that. All of them. A cabal called the Pentaveret, the Queen, the Pope, the Gettys, the Rothschilds, and Colonel Sanders before he went tits up. Which is a direct quote from Mike Myers' brilliant comedy, So I Married an Axe Murderer. At this point, it's been an hour of writing. My computer's going nuts. I kind of break the fourth wall. I say, if you haven't unfollowed by now, 1, you're nuts. 2, thank you for indulging my So I Married an Axe Murderer reference. Moving on, let's finish the story. I realize I got the audience. For some reason, people are listening to counterintelligence, grand theory. Let's go. The conspiratorial fever at about 108 degrees. We begin the 2016 election against everything holy in 2015. Republicans debate over 712 times, discussing topics such as who hated Obamacare more and who had a large penis. Jesus, that happened. The Democrats all debate who's going to get out of Hillary's way first, except for Vermont's own Bernie Sanders, who gets popular. I'm from Vermont and have known Bernie forever, so I'm very surprised, but everyone kind of likes it. Hillary wins anyhow. And now the target for electoral mischief is enormous. Hillary is the most known quantity in America with huge backstory. Creating a conspiracy narrative around the Clintons is like creating a Southern narrative around NASCAR and grits. Now, with Trump as the nonconformist, not like all the other rotten assholes, paragon, the Russians go into overdrive. The Russians didn't create Trump. Only New York City and American gullibility could have done that. But they've got a sweetheart outcome. Trump, a moron, is probably unlikely to take the whole enchilada. But that's perfect. If he gets close enough, he can cry unfair forever. Amazing scenario for Russia. Instead of Russia Today, they get an institutional nihilist chowderhead with American credentials. They butter him up. Hell, to hear many tell of it, they have compromat on him. But anyhow, they invest in his stuff. He was there in 2013. They have a lever. Note what I'm saying there. To hear many tell of it, they have compromat on him. I'd heard about the Steele dossier in the summer of 2016. I'd heard friendly reporting. British, had been trying to establish that Trump had some more serious stuff going on. I'd even heard some gross stuff about a hotel room. It was basically the Steele dossier. That made it to me. So by the time I'm writing this thread up, nobody has seen a copy of the Steele dossier, but I knew what it was. So it was not just a CIA classified product, thank you very much. And no, it was not serious intelligence reporting. They had been giving this to journalists. They had been giving this to people who were not read into the file. They were spreading it far and wide. so far that my desk, I had some version of it, right? And I knew that he was there in 2013 for the Miss America stuff. So I conclude the Russians have a lever. How much of a lever? I don't know. I'm certainly not saying the Russians own him. I'm not saying that they made him president. I didn't say that I thought that they thought they would make him president. I said they have a lever. If on the off chance Trump actually, and who could guess this, wins, then wow, they've got quite an opening. Either way, on the run-up to November 2016, Russian involvement was as subtle as a fart in a spacesuit. Scroll down my timeline for details, because as these stories about Trump and Russia came out, I covered it, because dude's running for president and he's talking nice about Vladimir Putin. That is not a good sign. I noticed it, a bunch of other people noticed it. The USIC had its hair on fire. This situation was incredibly dangerous. A paranoid US faction backing a rogue with ties to Russia. I think that states it accurately, and I think it's still true. Okay, Jesus, at long last, back to my initial premise. Why didn't Obama and Clinton do something? Jesus, what can you do? You come out and have the CIA enter the goddamn race for Clinton? True or not, we look like some weird crypto-fascist state. Or you let the Ruskies laugh and taunt and infiltrate Facebook with majillions of propaganda tales for idiots. Just let them run around? Do you come out the day after this totally weird smelling abomination of an election with all of its technical difficulties? Do you tell America the day after the election that Russia spearphished all of our think tanks in brazen fashion? Hillary, for her part, gives a brief and all too calm speech and goes hiking. Probably the best move on the board. Obama welcomes Mr. Trump in an intense, welcoming welcome to the White House. Mr. Big Winner Guy, welcome, fellow American. Trump looks like he swallowed a goldfish and stares at the floor a bit too long, as if maybe a joke has gone too far. In the next month, a small band of propagandists run in a circle and try and look like they're forming a government. It's ungainly. And now it's December 11th. Trump says he don't need no stinking intel agencies. Russia, blames Ukraine. A lot of Republicans stare into the middle distance, except for McCain and Graham, who are not having this shit. I salute you, gentlemen. And here we are, Americans, hopefully soon united. This isn't a partisan issue. Obama isn't late to the party. People are doing their jobs. If you think any of this is easy, you're ignorant and delusional. Tonight, though, I write to you with great hope. This may be America's finest hour as we act together with unshakable resolve to deal with enemies, foreign and domestic. We have done so in the past and come out stronger, more just, more pluralistic nation. We will do so now. And for me, or die trying. America is the steward of a genius system entrusted to flawed stewards whose descendants seem to act on the right side of history. This system is not rotten, not beyond repair, not exiled from the future. We have been infiltrated by agents who would drive us mad. This is a nation built on civilization, humanity, and reason, rejecting the febrile superstitions of the past. It must stand and will. We are at present in a place of danger where some of our fellow citizens have forgotten our most cherished values. We've been here before. America, reluctantly but dutifully, recognizes its internal contradictions and failings: slavery, racism, internment, classism. The genius documents that gave rise to noble American sentiments were themselves authored by those who failed them. Looking at you, Thomas Jefferson. We spilled the blood of our brothers to resolve the contradictions of slavery and then abandoned the project while killing Indians. Americans proclaimed the equality of all men while treating women as chattel and all non-whites as lesser. We are indeed hypocrites. But to be American is to accept that unflinchingly and to soldier forth for future generations and do better, goddammit. There are those who admire us in worldly cynicism to anchor us in a world where our institutions betray forever, where values perish. And to be American is to face that intellectual, moral, and spiritual assault with the unshakable devotion to something more lofty. And when that loftiness fails, as it so often does. To be American is to seize it again and again, knowing that our Creator desires progress. This is all off the top of my head, folks. I was just feeling the moment. The progress demanded by our Creator can be achieved by immigrants and natives, skeptics and believers, the elite and the humble alike. That is America. That is the promise that Americans often ignore and which more cynical nations would defile for their own gain. That America will last long after I have died, long after new people have picked up the torch, long after we betray it again, as we will. But America will go on, even if by another name, unless all who have heard her name are extinguished. This is just the locus of promise. America came from the olive groves of Italy and the shipyard of Plymouth and the islands of the Philippines, indivisible. America came from the Torah and Voltaire's Candide and Adam Smith and Zen koans and Greek mathematics and Rumi's poetry. America is all these things, and should yet another absolutist demagogue, foreign or domestic, seize her, it will be far from the end. Now is a time for patriots. It's also Sunday afternoon. I'm going to get a beer and watch football. God bless America and all nations. So that was the game theory thread in its full context. On December 9th, Jim Clapper, John Brennan, they go into the Obama White House and they decide they're going to come up with a story that departs from the intelligence community's existing reporting, which is that Russia gets up to this stuff, they did some cyber stuff, Trump has won, oh well, America picked a president, everyone's kind of surprised. Those guys decided that that wasn't enough, that this was going to be a story about how Russia picked Trump, that it was on purpose, that Trump now owes them, and it was going to color what everybody thought about his presidency to come. 2 days after they have this meeting, I step out in the middle of traffic and just go, let me do the equivalent of an intelligence community assessment from a completely unclassified, uncontrolled perspective, and it hit with the public. It went to millions of people. I was attacked immediately. The attacks have never really stopped. And my questions are, were the attacks against me and this thread, were they part of the same grand conspiracy that tried to attack the Trump presidency? I spent so many years attacking Trump myself, it would be highly ironic if Trump and I ended up being attacked by the same group of people. But hey, it's the spy game. There's weird stuff afoot. So grand juries are convening, subpoenas are going out, indictments will probably fall in the months to come. It's about to get really interesting. More game theory is on the way, folks. Thanks for spending this time with me, and stay curious.